Good evening, I'm Emma Southworth, I'm the creative producer for the Royal Ballet, and a very warm welcome to the Claw Studio here at the Royal Opera House. Tonight's Insight celebrates the bold, expressive world of American modern dance, tracing its journey from its earliest pioneers to work being made today. This month and next, the Limbury will be hosting and has hosted performances by Yorke Dance Project, Paul Taylor Dance Company, and the Royal Ballet dancing Pierrot Lunaire. These programmes offer a remarkable survey of American modern dance with works spanning almost a century. This evening, we're going to see some of those works rehearsed, and I'll be joined in conversation by directors from those three companies to explore the history, the artistry, and the innovation behind this exciting work. So first, let's go behind the scenes of Glenn Tetley's Pierrot Lunaire. And to introduce the rehearsal, please help me welcome choreographer and principal coach for Pierrot Lunaire, Christopher Bruce, Deirdre Chapman, repetiteur, and principal dancer of the Royal Ballet, Marcelino Sambe. So I just have to set a bit of context for our audience. We've really got history in front of us this evening. And we've got Chris, who you probably know as a choreographer, was an artistic director of Rambert. But as a dancer, you danced Pierrot Lunaire not long after Glenn created it. Deirdre, you've danced in it and now staging it. And then Marcy, you're the next generation, learning and having the work passed on to you. Christopher, let's start with you. You danced this piece with Ballet Rambert back in the 1960s. It was quite a new work then. I think it was radical, or it was seen as radical at the time, but your experience of it when it was being passed on to you, did it feel like there was this moment in history that it really was a radical work?
It did, because at that time, Ballet Rambert at that time had transitioned in 1966 into a smaller, more contemporary group. We started training in Martha Graham technique as well as classical. So we had the foundation to take on American modern dance to a certain extent. It really takes years. We've been doing it for months. But when Glenn Tetley came to work with Rambert for the first time, it was an enormous shock to us, in a way, because we were seeing a wonderful contemporary dancer, also with a very good classical technique, demonstrating his work. And the foundation of this work was in the Graham technique, and the rest of the cast dancing with Glenn was Linda Hodes and Robert Powell, both from the Graham Company. Glenn had danced with Graham too. So although one sees classical line, one sees the tradition of the commedia dell'arte, pantomime, the root of the movement comes from here, the solar plexus, the contraction and release. So the movement emanates and pushes. And to see Glenn demonstrating that movement was an eye-opener, and I think changed the world at Rambert.
And before we go into this rehearsal, it'd be really interesting to hear you reflect on what it was like working with Glenn, being in the studio with him.
Cruel. We'd never worked in this way. I remember a lot of the opening solos when Pierrot comes down from the scaffolding. It opens on the knee, and we were so naive, silly really. We were doing it without knee pads, so at the end of the day, there was blood everywhere on the floor, on our knees. And I remember the rehearsal started. We had Christopher Gable working with us, dancing in the Tudor repertoire in 66, 67. And he started at the front of the rehearsal, all the boys in the company learning this material. And gradually, throughout the day, Christopher found his way back to the back of the studio, nursing his knees, and the Rambert dancers got further forward, and it just changed my life, because he put me in the piece at sort of 21 years old, and It was the biggest gift in my life because I learned so much working with him.
And do you remember what the audience reactions, because I still watch it and I think it's a sort of, it really strikes you, the work, and it's sort of astonishing still today, but do you remember what the reaction back then was from the audiences?
I think, as I did at the time, the Schoenberg score was quite a shock. I did not like this music at first. I ended up loving it. It's a beautiful score, and it takes a person through the whole of their lifetime. This metaphor, really, it's from childhood to death. And I think, what was your question? Sorry, I've lost myself.
It was really what the audience, how the audience reacted to
so
the work.
the audience, some of them found the score difficult, but I think Glenn Marr's, the dance, the theatrical aspect so beautifully with the music. And so if the dancers are really conscientious about dancing to that music, it all becomes one. And they responded wonderfully.
Yeah.
And we opened in Richmond Theatre. There's Glenn Tetley, Norman Morris, my heavily pregnant wife, coming out of the theatre at 10 o'clock, jumping on a bus back to Notting Hill Gate, where we were all living, Glenn in his hotel. And Glenn had given me a bottle of champagne, and we'd run for the bus. No taxis in those days, there was no money. And I opened the bottle on the top deck of the bus. The champagne hit the ceiling, and for the rest of the journey, it was dripping off the ceiling, and we were sort of wigging, passing it around. It was the most extraordinary evening.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fantastic listening to your memories of that. But I'm just wondering, Marcy, when you're listening to that and you're taking on, you know, such a rich history, how does that change how you approach the role? But also, how do you balance that with your own artistry and bringing that to the role?
I must start by saying that I don't think I've ever been so vulnerable and scared to do a role in a long time that I can remember. It just feels like such a revealing work from within. Feels very important and intimate and poignant. So I've really been trying to be patient with my body and with my mind to really capture something that it's truthful to who I am, but as well truthful to what Glenn's vision was and what Chris and Deirdre have really passed on to me. And it's just been so scary, but I know that if you're doing something that really frightens you, you're growing. So I'm hoping that that's going to be something that's going to be important for me in the future. And it's already important now. Yeah.
And listening to you talk sort of after studio rehearsals, there's obviously this big emotional impact, but I think physically it's demanding as well.
Yes, I've had the chance to perform a Martha Graham piece a year ago, maybe, and every time I do something from this period of modern dance that is rooted in Martha Graham and this very physical work, I find it some of the hardest repertoire. And I have a huge respect for the people continuing with this legacy and really keeping this work alive, because it's extraordinarily hard on the body, and the technical, like you said, it is so guttural. It comes really from the center of the body, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot.
And Deirdre, you danced in the work with Rombert, but now you're at the front of the studio. Could you just talk a bit what will the audiences see? What can the audiences expect from this work that you're now observing?
Oh, I have a mic already
Okay.
that I'm now observing. I think what's really come to me in teaching it and helping the dancers understand it is how amazing it is as a work itself, in terms of what Chris was talking about, the kind of arc of what Pierrot goes through and transforms into in terms of the human, but also the tale that there's a timelessness to it, that and a relevance to the piece that sits and will continue to sit. And it's probably the hardest score I've ever worked with,
And
musically.
Musically, yeah.
And so it's also been a huge journey in helping the dancers understand that.
And the music, because it's the Schoenberg score that's about 1912, I think, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
What do you think that does when you've got a score like that to the actual performance? When you're dancing to music, or it's that spoken, sung music?
It's so intense. I mean, for me, it was probably the hardest work I ever danced as well, in all of the rep that I did. In terms of the physicality, but also the intensity. There's 3 dancers for 45 minutes, and that's it. And you are completely involved in this voice that is carrying these poems through the piece. And the intention of the voice and the movement marry together so well. But it's not the same. It's never the same, you know, because the singer's allowed a huge amount of space in how they might sing it. And so you have to be so present.
And just before we go into the rehearsal, I'm really interested, like Marcy and Chris, when you're in the studio, what is it that you're handing over to Marcy that you wouldn't get if you were just watching a video? What is it that you can pass on about the movements and about the role itself?
Well, first of all, the intention. It's a narrative work, so all the movement expresses what the poetry and the music is expressing. So you have to listen, you have to be at one with the score. You have to learn that score and just know when the singer's coming in, when the piano's coming in. So it's a lot of concentration and a lot of hard work for the dancers.
For me, having Christopher in the room was almost like opening a book and reading in such detail the feeling, the emotion, the theatricality, the full body of the piece, the underbelly of what you first see it. And I'm so thankful. And it will be a very important thing in my career, I think, having spent these days with you.
Great. I think on that note, I'm going to leave you to your rehearsal.
Perfect. Transformation. There was a really amazing picture of Marcy up here beforehand on the scaffold. We don't have the scaffold in this space, so we're not going to do that part. We're going to look at, very early on in the ballet, basically just when he's come down off the scaffold. And I'm going to push the music. I better get it right. Let me get a sense of where we are, Marcy.
Berauscht sich an dem heiligen Tranke, gen Himmel wendet verzückt das Haupt und taumelt, saugt und schlürft den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt. Des Mondlichts bleiche Blüten, die weißen Wunderrosen blühen in den Julinächten. Oh, brech ich eine nur. Banges Leid zu lindern, such ich am dunklen Strom des Mondlichts bleiche Blüten, die weißen Wunderrosen. Gestillt wär all mein Sehnen, heimlich. So selig leis entblättern auf deine braunen Haare des Mondlichts blau.
It's okay. That was very, you were drunk in the moonbeams.
When Pierrot comes off the scaffolding, it's like a child, very naive. The world is new. It's like a child reaching for things, almost frightened to reach for it, seeing the moon, being the moon, learning to walk, finding his balance, finding it, and then being overjoyed that he can do these things now. And that's what Marcy is showing here. And he's getting drunk on the moonlight. It's the wonder of being a child, being young, before life comes and bites you on the bottom. And that comes later in the piece. And you mature, you go through it. And all these movements, Glenn, you say, he's drunk on the moon.
I've lost this coordination.
There. Yeah, always get deep into your seconds. So
Use your plie, Marcy.
I think you need to use your plie.
There we go.
I think what is hard when this piece is taught to classical dancers is the classical dancer is used to being perpendicular on the balance. As soon as you start to work in contemporary movement, you've got to push. Almost the air is heavy. You've got to move and move into the ground and move off your balance. So like on his pirouettes, he needs to have his back in the right place to fall into the arabesque.
It's better.
Okay, drop that. That's it, into the hip, and the back will take you there. That's it. Okay. So he's using the back in a Graham way. He's using opposition. And in good classical ballet, you're using the back as well. And that will take you round. And it's engaging those principles in two important techniques that is so important in this piece. Okay.
Should we
Want
try
to
some?
go on?
Should we try the washing machine again?
Yeah.
And allow your weight to take you there, as opposed to pushing it.
Fall more.
Let yourself fall.
Wunderrosen. Gestillt wär all mein Sehnen, dürft ich so märchenheimlich so selig leis entblättern auf deine braunen Haare des Mondlichts bleiche Blüten.
Sorry, Marcy.
Mit einem Fantas.
That was better.
Seems like I am having a hard time understanding the landing and the figure of eight. It's not coming naturally.
after you've come from there. I think what you've got to do is get deeper, and then see
I
how-
think,
that's it. So the
Marcy, you
hips
get back
go,
there.
The whole body's turning, and the whole body makes that curving, moon-shaped attitude. Stay there. That's it. All you've got to do is fall back that way, and you're already on your leg, you see, to get into the arabesque.
slide
That's
to
it.
piqué.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Scary, that one.
as you, it's not just the leg. If you are making this spiral, you've got to bring the right shoulder forward. That will counterbalance you. Take your right shoulder forward. That's better. Okay. Otherwise, this happens. You lose the abdominals. You've got to stay there. Everything's fixed here, so you can move. That's all under control. Once the box of works is solid, you're there, then you can decide where you want to put the weight. There. Okay.
I'm still
Still going, you're still back. You're in spiral. Okay.
It's better.
Don't be obsessed with getting the leg high. For me, I think in the movement, it's the moon shape, it's the arc of the movement.
Marcy,
that is
almost
the dance.
think attitude side as opposed to back, and let your toe slowly lead you round.
I think it only works if you drop the left hip, so you're sinking into the right hip more. Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. That was better.
Perfect. I already am in a position that I have to go, and I kind of want to have a bit more back.
It's like it starts and then it comes as you come through the plie, it's going to extend back to suspend.
You need no force. The spiral will take you round. You just make the position there, and the head will. There. That's
That
it.
was nice.
Okay. And if you can get just back, fall back onto the leg. Okay. I'm not sure that I did a piqué on that. You're going on to, I'm sure I went into a flat, but
Piqué.
one of the problems I have if I ever come to rehearse this work is not to impose what I did, because I think Glenn gave me quite a lot of license. And I think no work is ever set in concrete. Most choreographers that dancers work with will be flexible about the way the work is danced and adjust to the dancer. You're feeding off the dancer as a choreographer. And if I look at other versions of this, they're sometimes quite different to the way I danced it. And I just did what I thought was right, and Glenn gave me the okay. He worked me very hard, corrected me, but I think when I saw, for instance, the Royal Danish Ballet do it in the 70s, it was quite different to the way I did it. And everyone will be different. You'll be different. Therefore, I'm applying certain principles, but I'm not telling him to do it as I did it. Therefore, he's going into a piqué in arabesque. I think I went on a flat foot into that. I was more into the ground. But that's the version. You can do it that way, whatever you were taught. So I have to be very careful.
Should we do a little bit of the mother solo?
The hard one.
Yeah. What's been really special about having Chris in the room is that I've taught the piece and I danced Columbine, but of course I never actually danced Pierrot. And so to have someone who had that firsthand kind of teacher of intention to kind of illuminate the meaning behind the steps has been really valuable for the Pierrots especially. And the section we're going to look at just now and talk about is kind of a transformational point in the piece where if Glenn spoke about the piece, the music is divided into there's 21 songs and they're divided into 3 different sections. This is the end of the first 7 songs, and in a way, it's Pierrot's. It's the beginning of Pierrot's adolescence, where he starts. There's self-doubt, there's discovery, and it's kind of a point where, in terms of your childhood, as a child, you realize that your parents maybe don't have all the answers and can't solve all your problems. So it's quite a hefty piece, narrative, little, and the steps are hard. So we're going to look at that. That'll be good. Oh, this is going to be a guess, Marcy.
An unstillbarem Liebesleid stirbst du an Sehnsucht tief erstickt, du nächtig todeskranker Mond. Dort auf des Himmels schwarzem den Liebsten, der im Sinnenrausch gedankenlos zur Liebsten geht, belustigt deiner Strahlen Spiel, dein bleiches, qualgeborenes Blut, du nächtig todeskranker Mond.
Good. Hard without mother and all. Good practice.
Beautiful. Just, you know, when you do that first movement, as you come out of it, go across and round there. There. Now, there. Now go across. And now you didn't hop, you see. Before, again, you were stepping underneath yourself and falling. So it's there. The movement's going from side to side.
I should come down then quite quicker, no? I'm almost stuck.
Juicy
there.
plie.
It's become a bad habit.
Yeah. Go. You just go through the foot.
Yes.
There. From here,
Good for that calf. Good for that
change
calf.
over, so you adjust your weight, you counterbalance, and through here to there. And from here, yeah, all this was beautiful, all that. Just be careful when you go swimming back that you're in opposition there. What you tend to do is,
Kind of direct.
yeah, a bit like that. Okay. So back, back, floating back, swimming back. Okay. And what you've got to indicate is that on that first jeté, like you did before, and they're getting smaller, and from here when you land, you see that everything's changing.
So that
The
last
light's fading, the
diagonal.
mood's gone. Okay. So what you're saying is, where is it? Then you're trying to pull the moon back into your body, all that white. So I just don't feel we see why the jetés disintegrate. We have to see that it's getting dark. It's another.
And I think the
frightening period.
physicality of that last diagonal can be much lower and softer, because of course that will take us with you.
I think if I really focus on trying to understand why everything feels
Yeah,
That's better.
yeah.
even more complex.
Yeah. It's less about, it's not about the step there. Yeah.
When you do and when you do this one, can you keep it smooth? So there's no hard lumps, there's no punctuation in it. That's it. So you have to control it onto point and balance before you go. That's it, good. And forward. Then you can fall back, and then the next one. You're just saying that everything's fading. Where is everything? And you're trying to bring it back, close, bring the moonlight into those white trousers again. Okay. Good.
What's time we have?
Thank you so much, Deirdre Martin. Next week, we are going to be hosting Paul Taylor Dance Company on the Limbury stage here at the Royal Opera House. Their dancers are not yet in the UK, but I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this evening by Artistic Director Michael Novak to introduce the company and give us a sneak peek of what we can expect from next week. Michael. You're making a return. Paul Taylor Dance Company is making a return after you haven't been here for over 2 decades.
23 years.
23 years. So it's absolutely amazing to have you here. Now, Paul Taylor, I mean, really, when you look back, he's one of those great pillars of American modern dance, really of 20th century dance, isn't he? We are going to get the chance a bit later to delve a little bit more into his work and into the history. I think we need a 5-hour insight, actually. But could you just introduce Paul's movement to our audience who might not be familiar with it?
Okay, so like I'm giving you your dance history lesson, okay? So like Martha Graham kind of comes out of this lineage of women. This is like the dawn of the 20th century where women were kind of liberating the body. This notion of the tutu and the point shoe and like what the body has to be vertically. And Martha comes in along with Isadora Duncan and Ruth St. Dennis, and they're like, no. And they start moving and they start opening up this notion of what the body, the female body specifically, can do. Through Martha, who kind of changes how dance uses the pelvis and the contraction. A number of choreographers emerge from that. One is Merce Cunningham and Paul Taylor. Now, Paul Taylor danced with Martha Graham for a number of years and decided she did a lot of Greek tragedy. And Paul was like, I've done it, I'm good. But he made friends, he became very close with Merce Cunningham. So he was one of the founding members of the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, which most people don't know. So Paul's doing this radical avant-garde stuff. He works with Merce, and Merce was doing a lot of chance operations, a lot of like, we're gonna like counts, steps, it just happens, right? Randomness is the thing. And Paul's like, okay, I did that, check. What am I gonna do next? I want to go work with George Balanchine at New York City Ballet, where he was invited to be a guest artist. Mr. B invited him to join New York City Ballet. Paul said no, because I did it, check. I'm going to start doing my own work. So he has a Graham background, he has a Cunningham background, he's worked with George Balanchine, and most importantly, before all of this, he was a competitive swimmer in college. If you think of Michael Phelps, like 6'5", long wingspan, we're known as a brawny company, but like hardy, strong, low to the floor power. And that's what was so interesting. No one had seen someone that big move that fluid and that powerfully in dance yet, which is why Martha was like, I want you, and Merce Cunningham was like, we're gonna be friends, and George Balanchine was like, I want you with me at City Center in New York. So Paul fuses all of this together in his movement style, which it comes a lot from swimming. It comes from the flow of moving through water. But having done the Greek tragedies, having done what we call the aesthetic of indifference that you'll see in a lot of avant-garde work where it's shape, placement, but there's not necessarily an emotion behind it, Paul takes that and opens it up to the extreme. And he's known as the master of light and dark. So his works will be incredibly horrific and violent. And then he'll do slapstick comedy, which some critics love, some critics don't. They think it's a bit sophomoric, you might say. But Paul runs that emotional gamut in his repertory, and that all comes together.
And is that what you've been able to demonstrate? Because we've got 2 programs next week in the Limbury, but
Yeah.
so you've had to make a choice of
Yes.
what to
Yeah.
bring. How have you been able to demonstrate that range in what you've chosen?
Yeah, so we have 2 programs. There are 6 dances total. The earliest is from 1975, the latest is from 2022. 3 works are returning to London. One piece called Brandenburgs, to the Bach Brandenburg Concertos. It's beautiful, it's classical. If you know Concerto Barocco, for my fans in the house, you might want to come and see Brandenburgs, because Paul takes a different take on it. We have Esplanade, hailed a masterpiece on its premiere. That's coming back. All of these have not been seen in 3 decades. And then Piazzolla Caldera, which is Paul's fusion of the complexity, the passion, the social gender tension of the tango, and he infuses it with the athleticism of modern dance. So those are returning. We have 3 pieces that are making their international premiere. We have Concertiana. It's the last dance that Paul Taylor made before he died. And I was in that cast. We didn't know it was the last piece that he was going to be making, but the piece has this joy and sorrow interlaced. It's very formulaic, it's very clean, but it's kind of his offering. And then we have 2 works by our resident choreographers, Lauren Lovett and Robert Battle. Lauren Lovett choreographed a piece with all the men of the Taylor Company to Kevin Putt's Contact, and it's her exploration of these labels of masculinity and maleness and toxic masculinity and gender, and she kind of rips that open in a very athletic and beautiful and heartfelt way. And then Robert Battle takes on jazz, Ella Fitzgerald, a number of like the classics. So you see, the point is to show you that if you think you have a notion of what the Taylor Company was or is, I'm going to blow that open.
Amazing.
On both programs, yeah.
And to demonstrate that, I think we've got a video clip
Yes.
that we can
Yeah.
show your audience to just give you a sense
Yeah.
of all of that.
So we made this right after Paul died. We entered the pandemic. We did a virtual benefit, because that's what we did in 2020. But we wanted to educate our audiences about the scope of the company, its history. So what you're going to watch is a brief time capsule all the way from 1954 when the company started until the present day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Let's take a look.
Paul had an indescribable way of leading our family. He did come from a family where his father left the house pretty much right after he was born. He had, 2 stepsisters and a stepbrother. And so he was always sort of outside.
I was thinking a lot about the whole family image, and the way it shows up in so many dances, and the way there are actually, moments where you can see that it's a family. He picked up his family along the way.
The company was quite small when I joined. We were 6 and then went to 7 and stayed there for a while. There was a feeling of pioneering.
A small group of dancers with one vision took over the world artistically.
That's incredibly modern. The idea that you could do more with less.
The work from the 60s is of a time with a smaller company in smaller rehearsal studios for smaller stages,
The company grew in numbers and the pieces got bigger, as did Paul's collaborations with other artistic luminaries.
One of the things Paul always talked about being an artist, he said, we all hung out together. I hung out with the painters, the sculptors, the actors, the playwrights, the poets. Some of Paul's greatest works are the collaborations with Alex Katz. And that was a genius relationship. And it led to some of the greatest pieces in all of modern dance.
had the good fortune to be in these masterworks. That was like living inside some incredible painting.
Our most famous work, Esplanade, Paul acknowledged, he saw a woman running down Houston Street after a bus that left, and he thought, that's great.
I remember certain people that would read what we would write for grants or for letters and stuff and be like, don't call it pedestrian, it's not pedestrian. I was like, right here in the book, he calls it pedestrian when he talks to me. And he was like, I'm the one that made it, I'll tell you what it is. Some of the greatest works that people cherish were, say, from 75 to 1991 or 2. The hits kept coming. Pieces like Sacra and Ardencourt and all these pieces that are so meaty.
There's a lot of dangerous stuff in Paul's work. There's a lot of tricky partnering. There's a lot of death-defying moments.
When something is exquisite, that step had to be right next to that other step in time and space.
He was really interested in what made people laugh. He thought it was really important. He's like, hey, if people are laughing out loud, at least I know they're paying attention.
I have been in performances where audiences walked out. We were doing Speaking in Tongues. It's basically a work about a religious community in the end of this intense, dramatic, religious cult setting. They all kill themselves so that they can have the ecstasy of connecting to God. And audiences laughed. And I remember us after the show were like, that means we're doing our job.
When you get to the 90s of Paul Taylor's work, one of his greatest sort of desires was to be able to present that balance of beauty and the opposite. And you don't see beauty unless it's against something. The works he made in the 90s just were mind-boggling, Company B, Eventide, Piazzolla, and then 2001 he made Promethean Fire, perhaps one of his greatest works.
Audiences are transported somewhere. Your job, the date, what theater you're in, who you're sitting next to, all vanishes. And all of a sudden you're in a completely different world and there's a magic happening.
That's a little bit of the mystery, that we don't really know how we're touching people. That's kind of intense, wonderful stuff.
You come together because of the human moments that you're all in.
The feelings transcend the moment that they were created. It's really stunning. And I think that, when we worry for the future of modern dance, I'm like, but we have the collection.
We have 66 years of choreographic work.
177 dances in our canon and growing.
Last Look, Roses, Esplanade, Runes.
He isn't saying like, hey, look at this different part of me.
He's saying, look at this different part of us.
Our dancers, Paul, dance makers of the past, and new choreographic voices.
We have the collection of human emotion.
That's not going out of business.
Thank you again, Michael. It was absolutely brilliant to catch a glimpse of what we're going to see next week. Rounding off our programme of American modern dance, we're going to see one more extract this evening from Yorke Dance Project. Please give a very warm welcome to Associate Director Stephen Pelton. Hi, Stephen. We've just come to the end of a very busy week for you. We've had 4 sold-out performances in the Limbury of a programme called Modern Milestones.
Hard to say.
With 5 works that Yolanda and yourself discussed and have put on the stage for us. Could you just tell us what the audiences have been watching? Can you tell us about what that programme's made up of?
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me. Modern Milestones grew out of as we were putting together the next program, we realized that it was going to be Robert Cohan's centenary, the same year that it was the Martha Graham Company's centenary. It was also Christopher Bruce's 80th birthday, and we were in discussion with Chris about making a new work. It was the 60th anniversary of the Bella Lewitsky Company, which is a company from California that Yolanda had danced with and whose work we had done in the past. And then also we wanted to, so we thought, oh, well, we'll do something about milestones. And then at the same time, we decided to take on a young choreographer, Liam Francis, and as our first associate artist, and it was also the year he was launching his company. So that all came together in a nice sort of sense of milestones and what is modern dance, and here we are.
That's amazing. So what I really appreciate this evening is, having done 4 performances this week, we're now going to be joined by 2 dancers. We're going to see a rehearsal of Robert Cohen's Lacrimosa. Let's welcome the dancers to the stage. We've got Jonathan Goddard and Ellie Braund. I'm going to leave you to it.
So we're going to watch all of Lacrimosa. It's a relatively short work. I think it's about 8-9 minutes altogether. And interestingly, I was talking with a colleague about it last night, and although it's a short work, we were saying how it doesn't feel like Bob was limited. Robert Cohen, we all talk about him as Bob, so I can't call him Robert. It doesn't feel like Bob saw it as a miniature. He sees it as existing, I think, as grand and as time-filled a space as necessary, and I hope as it takes. I hope you'll see that as you're watching it. And just to set it up a little bit, one of Bob's real concerns and interest as a choreographer was about communication and about how, and it's been very interesting watching the other pieces, about how if thinking becomes speech, how does thinking also become movement? And how is the need to speak mirrored in the need to move? And so he very much was about trying to make work that was articulate and that was legible to an audience. He used to tell this story about how in one of his first concerts, his niece came to see it, and I don't know how old she was, maybe not even a teenager, and she came backstage and said, I understood every word. And she had just seen a dance with no speaking in it. And I think that's really a lot about what Bob was after, and that kind of direct communication that we experience with speech. And in this ballet, it starts with a conversation between the 2 characters, and we're going to see that first part of it now. And things to watch for are how much they are acting in response to one another. And because it's in silence, it can take as much time as it needs to take. And for them, it's really about listening to how the other dancer is offering each word and each response to each word or each movement that gets said. So we will start with that. Yes? And you'll see in a minute that this is where the music starts. Great, that was beautiful, thank you. So in just the first entrance and the first two steps, Bob has set up that, I forgot to mention that when the curtain opens, Ellie is already on stage and John is coming in from the wing. So when he enters, he's returning to her, or seeing her for the first time, but we think of it as a return. And then she comes towards him, but then she backs away. So in just that opening moment, he sets up that there's a tension and that there's a way that they're testing the proximity they have to one another and how and if they are going to come back together. And that is most of dance to me, really, is the space between people and how, if they connect, are they going to connect. And then he does, there's so much to say about that section, but there's a wonderful moment, maybe you could do it again and I'll talk about it, where John listens, as we listen to a conversation, he listens to Ellie's center, that same center, keep going guys, that same center that we've been talking about where Graham work originates from. And where her womb is. Great. And the whole time that she's doing all that, he just is still listening to her. And in a way, he layers that in as a cue for us that we need to listen, but also to demonstrate in a very literal way that they're listening to each other. He also puts in another very literal cue. Well, two of them actually. Can you do both of the upside down lifts? So he comes back to her and one of the first things he does after he spins around is he turns her upside down. He turns her world upside down. And that happens again later. Can you do the next one? When he's listening from another direction. He turns her upside down and turns her round. And I think he means those things very literally, as they happen very literally in our lives, that people's effect on us can turn our world around or turn our world upside down. So that's the introductory section to Lacrimosa, and now we'll just watch with music from the point where we left off. So go from right where we were, actually.
Thank you so much. It has been wonderful to watch some rehearsals and to showcase what we have been watching and what we're going to see in the Limbury Theatre as part of our focus on American modern dance. There is such a rich lineage to explore from Martha Graham, Merce Cunningham, Paul Taylor and Glenn Tetley by bringing together these companies, Yorke Dance Project, Paul Taylor Dance Company and the Royal Ballet dancing Pierrot, Lunaire. And we hope to celebrate that history as well as the ongoing innovation of modern and contemporary dance. Our evening is not yet over. We're going to get the chance to hear from all three companies now to hear about how they're carrying dance heritage forward, both in the US and the UK. So please give a very warm welcome back to Michael Novak, Stephen Pelton, Deirdre Chapman, and we're now also joined by Director of the Royal Ballet, Kevin O'Hare. Thank you, everybody. I feel like we've had the chance, and we're going to have the chance now to get into some really key figures of American modern dance, but I feel we probably need about another couple of hours to do that, so we're going to do our best. I think I'd like to start by talking about why these programmes and why now. And Stephen, you talked about the pieces that were in the Modern Milestones programme. What do you think is important about those pieces? Why is it important for audiences to see those works at this moment?
Well, I think it's important to see work that's useful. And when people use the word relevant, which it gets used a lot these days, I'm hoping that means that the work is still useful. And so if you're watching Deep Song, which is the Graham Ballet we just did, which is a 6-minute piece from 1937 and her response to the Spanish Civil War, is that still useful? Yes, sadly. And I think, the idea of looking at lineage and talking about lineage is great, but it has to be about why is the lineage important. Yeah. So you see the lineage, Michael was talking about it, through Isadora, through Martha, to all these other choreographers, including Bob, who really started dancing with Martha, and all the way through to us, and to us not just as artists and choreographers, but as audience.
Yeah. And Michael, as you were saying, the company hasn't been here for 2 decades. You danced with the company, and actually Paul chose you as his successor, which is quite a responsibility. But again, in terms of the programme you're bringing to show us now, what feels important about this moment and those works in front of audiences in the UK?
I'm always fascinated by this notion of the timely and the timeless. And great pieces of art, I have found, are created in a specific moment in time, usually through some type of a sociocultural lens that is inspiring that artist to either respond to or predict, where the world is going. And then something happens with extraordinary pieces of music, visual art, dance, opera that maybe 10, 20 years go by, the piece all of a sudden gains a new relevancy. It has a new poignancy, sometimes tragically, in the sense that we're still there, we're still talking about these, hard subjects that are part of humanity. But there's this cycle that happens where these pieces that were made 1934, there's still lessons in that for audiences of all ages. It still has a relevancy to it. So when you're looking at a canon that spans over a century, it's what are those dances in 2026 that actually still strike us? And it doesn't have to be political, it could be joy. It could be reminding people of love. It can be a reaction to that too. So when I program, I look at that. Where are we now? Where are audiences now? Not just domestically, but internationally too. And then what repertory, not just Paul's, but from the canon, can I help to kind of invigorate, inspire, confront audiences with how do we live life? How do we respond to it?
And Kevin, I mean, talking about a rich heritage, we've already talked about how daring Pierrot Lunaire was back in the late 1960s and putting it here in front of London audiences. We haven't done it here at the Royal Ballet since 2005, I think. What brought it back to you and why you wanted to put it on as part of this season?
Yeah, for a lot of reasons. One, it's another milestone. So it's 100 years since Glenn's birth, and so it felt very appropriate to bring that work here. I think it's a masterwork, and I think Emma's curated a great program of work in the Limbury, and I think actually I was really excited to see it in the Limbury. When we did it last, we did it on the main stage, which it was a bold thing to do because you think of that, it's such an intimate work, but it worked very well. But I thought it would be fascinating to see it in the Limbury Theatre and to see those performances up close. And I'm really excited to bring it. Glenn was a big part of helping the Royal Ballet sort of open its eyes away from its wonderful choreographers that it had within the company, but to actually open its eyes to modern dance in the 70s. So I think it's hopefully a lovely tribute to him as well. Yeah, and Deirdre, you dance the work, you were a dancer, you're now teaching that work. How do you see that work placed, really from a dancing point of view? What does that give to the dancers of the Royal Ballet?
I think it's a really important part of the legacy of dance in general, in the sense that yes, it's a centenary of of Tetley's birth, but in a sense, his work was very transformational in where it drove a lot of other choreographers and how it drove a lot of choreographers to develop. For example, Christopher Bruce, it was very transformational in terms of where he went as a choreographer, but other choreographers, I mean, Glenn himself went over to Europe and worked with the very beginnings of NDT and the very beginnings of Stuttgart, and then he went back to National Ballet of Canada and worked as an associate choreographer there. So he influenced a huge number of artists and dance makers around the world, and in a sense had a part in shifting what we think of dance is capable of today. And we don't sit in a point where you have modern dance and you have classical ballet. You have this huge spectrum of work and dancers that are keen to understand and learn from all of those works. And so to be able to kind of help bring this generation of artists an understanding of how powerful that work is and how relevant it is now and how it's related to the other work they do today is really important.
And we've seen this exchange, haven't we? And we had the earliest 20th century, but then this sort of peaking of interest in exchange, I think in the middle of the 20th century of people like Martha Graham coming over here. And then leading to Bob coming over and setting up London Contemporary Dance Theatre and school. How important was Bob as a figure in terms of facilitating that exchange between dance and the two countries?
Very. Wow. Well, I'm not his biographer.
No.
There is a biography on Robert Cohan if you want to look out for it. It's called The Last Guru by Paul Jackson. I think very important in that Graham's technique wasn't being taught over here. And also Bob was forming his own technique, which is very much based in Graham, but it was his own. And Liam was talking the other night in the talk that we did in the Limbury we were talking about legacy and how so much of the legacy is, it's what we learn in class. And then what we learn as audience watching the dancers who'd been in that class be themselves physically on stage and how that affects us physically. So, it couldn't have come over without Bob's body.
And I mean, Paul's did the same, really, coming over to the UK and sharing. But I don't know whether you want to just talk a little bit about that and the importance of that exchange when he came over here.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying about these like silos of like here's ballet and here's Broadway and here's modern dance, and like we're all kind of separate. And I think I try to instill with our dancers that like it wasn't. It really, the 1950s, 1960s was just this hot melting pot. I mean, at least in America and in New York City, I mean, everyone was working with everybody, and the innovation that came out of those 3 or 4 decades was extraordinary. And then because of state funding that we had in the country at the time, like it was funded to go out into the world. So that public support that we had at the time to kind of showcase that innovation, this intersectionality of the modern and the ballet and the theatrical and the jazz, like all coming together and getting out, was what I think catapulted dance into the late 20th century. And that's what I'm hoping, like, coming out of the pandemic, like these types of conversations, these types of collaborations, reminding us of our roots, but then like how are we innovating through that? And who's seeing it? And who's not, and what barriers are at play that we can break down.
Yeah, and in terms of Glenn Tetley and the Royal Ballet, he then actually went on to make several works for the Royal Ballet. But I mean, can you feel the impact of that work happening there in terms of what you're now doing with the Royal Ballet?
Yeah, well, I think, like we've been saying about the influences had around so many companies, you know, and that started, and actually, you know, after he was first here in the 70s, then choreographers started to come and use the more modern technique, more away from the classical technique, and I think it gave people sort of the feeling that yes, we can try this, yes, we can be bolder, and it's something that's continued on now into our generation, and it's wonderful to see exactly what you're saying. There doesn't seem the divide here, and I think we were probably later to the party than America, but here I think there isn't the divide now between what's a contemporary choreographer, what's a classical choreographer, and you see all the companies across the country actually working with so many different interesting choreographers from such different backgrounds, and that's what makes it exciting.
Great, and Deirdre, as a dancer, have you watched the training change to adapt to that changing repertoire, really, and the development of the art form and that coming together?
Yes. I mean, I think I was very unusual in that my childhood training, I actually had Graham and ballet in pretty much equal amounts. Because the school I was in Minneapolis was associated with Minnesota Dance Theater, which was actually a contemporary company. So they did Graham, they did Tetley, they did all sorts of very contemporary work at the time. I then ended up in San Francisco Ballet and Rambert, but then at the Royal Ballet. And so I've seen the dancers in the last 20 years and the training in this country, since I've been here now for a long time, the training has shifted dramatically in that it's not enough to, if you want to be a ballet dancer in a company like the Royal Ballet, it's not enough to just do a ballet class every day. You know, you have to be versatile and familiar in numerous contemporary techniques. You have to know how to improvise. You have to have an understanding even of kind of hip-hop techniques, and there's even quite a few tappers that get pulled out to do various things. And so the training in all the schools has shifted as a consequence. And in many ways, I think it actually takes a lot longer to train a dancer now because they have to learn so many more ways to use their bodies.
Yeah, great. I'm really sorry. That's actually all we've got time for this evening. I think there's a conversation and then about another 3 insights that we could do. But thank you so much for being with us, all of you, this evening. Paul Taylor are performing their 2 programmes with us in the Limbury Theatre from the 27th of January. That's from next week. And the Royal Ballet are performing Pierrot Lunaire from the 10th of February. So do go onto the Royal Ballet and Opera website for more information and to book your tickets. Thank you again to all our dancers this evening, to Christopher Bruce and Deirdre Chapman. Thank you to our audience here in the Claw and to all of you who are watching around the world online. Thank you and good night.